Will Crowley and Aziraphale become human by the end of the finale? It's one of the more divisive fan theories.
What makes you say that? Oh, I think it's my brain, but I'm not sure.
Some people deeply desire this potential outcome, while others would find it devastating. My intent with this video is not to conclusively say that this theory, that they will become human, is either right or wrong, something I agree with or disagree with, but to explore every nook and cranny of this idea and then let us all come to our own conclusions. What about the theory makes it potentially plausible? What makes it potentially implausible? What other things might we consider when we think about this theory, that Aziraphale and Crowley will become human, or at least mortal? There's quite a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Stories about non-humans wishing they could become human or making efforts to blend in with humanity or lamenting that they cannot have been told for as long as we've been telling stories.
Of all the souls I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human.
The Celtic Selkies and Puka, Frankenstein's monster, Pinocchio, both Data and Spock in Star Trek. I know, Spock was half human, but still. Blade Runner, The Bicentennial Man by Isaac Asimov. It's a very popular conceit both in older fantasy and in more modern science fiction, and for good reason. These kinds of stories help us explore aspects of our human nature from an external perspective. They often touch on the longing we all have for belonging. The protagonists in these stories often feel isolated due to their non-human nature, and therefore they desire to be part of human society. In cases where they cannot, such as Blade Runner and Frankenstein's monster, we see it as a tragedy. They also struggle with their identity. The process of transformation often brings internal conflict as they grapple with their dual nature, fully a part of neither world. Audiences, both ancient and modern, find these to be relatable and informative experiences. And although Crowley and Aziraphale aren't actively trying to become human, nor are they actively trying to become part of human society, both of them, through simple exposure, are doing both of those things just sort of by happenstance. They are undeniably picking up some human traits: empathy, curiosity, imagination, desire, etc., and they are becoming more entrenched in human affairs. In addition, Aziraphale at least is struggling with a dual identity crisis, and both of them are seeking belonging since they no longer fit in with heaven and hell, and honestly haven't for quite some time. I recognize that there are these and other aspects of the Good Omens story that reflect this age-old tale. So let's start with the things in Good Omens that make this theory plausible. To be human. Mortality gives meaning to human life. Lieutenant Commander Data, Star Trek The Next Generation. Another trope in storytelling is the beauty of the ephemeral. The fleeting nature of the rose is why it's so cherished. William Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, Kansas. Many famous artists and their works muse upon the fleeting nature of life and all of the trappings of humanity, and the beauty inherent because of it. There is also a common theme among stories about immortals of grief and loss and boredom.
Sometimes I think a Time Lord lives too long.
Loved ones die, things constantly change, and everything becomes mundane and tiresome. Vampires are sad boys. The gods are all fading away and being forgotten. As Crowley says, you can't get too attached to humans. It's apparent that he at least has felt some sort of loss and at times is tired of the entire ordeal on Earth. It's also apparent that he's felt some sort of depression at times about his eternal role in things and how humans continually treat each other. The authors regularly reference other classic works of literature, movies, and even pop culture, so it's entirely possible that these themes could be woven into the character arcs for Crowley and Aziraphale. Something else in favor of the theory is in the Good Omens novel, and in Season 1 of the TV show, there is the idea that form shapes nature. God says it more than once, in reference to Dog. If Dog had been allowed to remain a giant snarling hellhound, then that would have shaped his nature. But since Adam imagined Dog to be a cute little terrier, that is the form that Dog takes, and this form has an ongoing effect on Dog, changing his nature from that of the giant snarling hellhound to that of a normal little dog. In fact, Adam himself reflects the same idea. He grows up in very normal circumstances, with normal friends and parents in a lovely hamlet in the English countryside. And this form of a normal boy affects his nature. He chooses to become a human. In the phrasing he uses to defeat Satan at the end of season 1, he says, "You're not my dad and you never were," which of course creates a bit of a paradox, but essentially he is saying he's a human boy and always has been, which in a sense is completely true. Crowley and Aziraphale have been issued human bodies, and unlike the other angels and demons who either only use human bodies on rare occasions or never at all, Crowley and Aziraphale have been wearing theirs roughly since Eden 6,000 years ago. And it isn't just about the physical form, which is not 100% anatomically correct. In the books, it is explained that angels and demons have no sexual organs unless they make an effort, but about the very normal world they surround themselves with, just like Adam. Aziraphale has very much willingly tied himself to a shop full of normal physical things, books. He's fascinated by all of the information humanity has generated. He is enchanted by the human ability to do magic tricks. He loves good food, nice clothing, music, and comfy chairs. He's a landlord and has tenants. He understands more about childbirth than the other angels even thousands of years ago. He understands that Sidis, being in her 50s, means 7 more children are not a biologically doable thing. Crowley loves wine and whiskey, movies and cars and watches, and all the technical doodads and whiz-bangs the humans have created. He has also developed empathy for their suffering, able to relate to it on some level with his own suffering. He has learned some human customs and apparently befriended at least a few of them over the centuries, including Christ and Leonardo da Vinci. His most prized possession is a car made by humans. He gets junk mail. He enjoys his plants. Undoubtedly, in many ways, they simply are becoming more human as time passes. That is, their emotions and their free will and their creativity are all becoming more developed, though their base nature remains that of an immortal being, occult or ethereal if you will. But even so, every moment they spend on Earth brings them closer to humanity. In storytelling, a good writer will craft a satisfying conclusion. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean a happy conclusion. Often, the very best endings are those we think of as bittersweet. Frodo saving the Shire, but being unable to live there, changed forever by the horrors he's lived through. The Shawshank Redemption. Andy escapes, but only after years of being unjustly locked up for a crime he did not commit. In Gladiator, Maximus clears his name, but he's lost everything that matters to him in the end, so his death is a sort of release. In Toy Story 3, Andy gives away his toys before going off to college. Edward Scissorhands survives the tragic end of the story, but although he and Kim are still in love with each other, they will probably never see each other again. David Tennant said he was very satisfied with the ending when he was asked back in early May of this year. I think it can also be argued that Terry Pratchett was not one to end his stories with neat little happily ever after bows, but tended towards more complex emotional endings. This is also something that I think modern audiences tend to appreciate, more variegated layers of emotion and meaning. The same being true also of He Who Must No Longer Be Named. So there is also this possible narrative reason for what many would view as a bittersweet ending. Crowley and Aziraphale somehow defeat the Second Coming and detach themselves from heaven and hell, but the cost of being together is mortality, like Arwen and Aragorn. But, while all of this remains true, Good Omens also has a tendency to turn traditional narratives on their heads. So let's go ahead and take a look at the things that make this theory less plausible. Or not to be human. Although humans have been pointing out the beauty of the ephemeral for eons, one of the things that makes Crowley and Aziraphale special is their enduring millennia-long relationship. In the real world, we are surrounded by change. Nothing feels certain anymore, not our jobs or our political systems or even the things we grew up believing. The world has always been full of loss and change, but today it can feel more rapid and overwhelming. In this crazy world, the idea that there is this constant thread, this reliable thing that is always there, always the same, is very appealing. Crowley could always rely on Aziraphale, and Aziraphale could always rely on Crowley. This holds true internally, in-universe, and for the audience. Many fans feel the draw of having that stable something as much as the characters do. It's one of their main appeals. It also might be more than just a little bittersweet to have them become mortal, to spend 6,000 years on Earth and who knows how many beforehand not being able to be openly together, only to be granted at most a few decades. And then one of them is very likely to die before the other if they're truly and completely human. But the actors and other creatives have said it over and over. You can't have one without the other. That one might outlive the other is a thought that seems both unfair and depressing. Neither of them are suffering from the age-old complex of boredom either. Aziraphale still finds joy and wonder in everyday tasks. He's not bored with life on Earth. Crowley seems more frustrated by human behavior, but he's not bored. He even laments that there would be no nightlife to speak of on Alpha Centauri. And because they have each other and potentially more new immortal friends to be made in characters like the reformed Gabe and Bee, Muriel and Aziraphale, they do not suffer from the loss and grief in quite the same way other immortals might. There's a recent trend of subverting tropes, and by recent I mean the last 30 or so years. Heroes are shown as villains. Villains are given backstories that help audiences empathize with them. The guy doesn't get the girl in the end. The main character dies at the end of Act 1. The princess decides to remain an ogre and marries an ogre herself instead of the prince. I'd also like to point out the character of Hob in the Sandman series. He's a very normal human who is granted eternal life by death. After death and Dream overhear him lamenting that people only die because everyone dies and that death is rubbish. Dream tells Hob to meet him at that tavern where they first met every 100 years, believing that Hob will become despondent or bored with life. But Hob never is. Even when he is falsely imprisoned and tortured or after his family dies of illness, Hob wants to keep going. He keeps coming back every 100 years, and his zeal for living, though it has its ups and downs, never abates completely. Sandman takes the trope of the immortal regretting their eternal life and turns it on its head. I think it's entirely possible to see that same trope reversal in Good Omens. And although Crowley and Aziraphale have taken on human characteristics, it doesn't mean they have to somehow transform completely from eternal beings into mortal ones. There's an argument to be made that Adam still retains some of his supernatural powers despite willing himself to be the child of Mr. and Mrs. Young. As far as the narrative goes, telling a satisfying ending that isn't too Hallmark Channel sickly sweet, but still maintains a positive tone, one that David found satisfying, is something that can be achieved in many different ways. There are a multitude of potential paths to something more nuanced and emotionally complex. They might indeed lose people or angels or demons they have come to think of as friends. They might butt up against the very real possibility of losing each other in some way before it's resolved. The extremely thorny problems of heaven and hell and God's ineffable plan could continue to be a thorn in their side. I cannot imagine that they will solve all of the problems of angels and demons, even if we had the full 6 episodes. There's a whole world of ways that the story can be completed and remain bittersweet while they maintain their immortality. But there are a few things to consider before each of us makes our final determination about this theory. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There are a few questions that I think would need to be answered if Crowley and Aziraphale were to become human in the end, issues that would need to be addressed. The first is, would they go back to heaven and or hell when they died, separating them again? Perhaps the South Down Cottage is a sort of heaven. We never see humans in heaven, so we don't know what it's like. That might be one way of addressing it, but it's still a bit of a sticky issue. What about the other 10 million angels and 10 million demons? We've already seen hints that more and more of them are taking on human characteristics as well. Creativity, disobedience, free will. Will they also all turn human at some point? And where the heck are 20 million new people going to live and get jobs and find food and clothing? That's roughly the population of Kazakhstan or Chile. And what happens to heaven and hell if all eternal beings were to suddenly become mortal? It could be a solution, one way to end the horribly destructive system, but it could also create as many problems as it solved. There is also the fact that Gabriel and Beelzebub left together and they didn't need to become human to do so. Although, on the other hand, Gabriel sort of became human for a while in the form of Jim in order to facilitate he and Bee getting away together. And at the same time, there might need to be a price paid for the happy ending for getting heaven and hell off of their backs. So we have half a dozen on one side and 6 on the other, as the saying goes. We have our list of reasons that they might become human and our list of reasons that they might not. I think there are 2 answers inside each of us here, what we want to see and what seems most likely to us. Those may match up for you or they may not. Which way will the dominoes fall? Do you want to see them become human? Do you think they will? Are there points for each side of the argument that I didn't address? Let me know the answer to these questions down in the comments. Personally, I am very attached to their immortality and I would like to see them keep it. I don't know if I believe they will or not, however. I feel like I change my mind on this topic every time I speak to someone else about it. But I really do want to know what all of you think. I look forward to what you have to say on this topic. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel. If you enjoy analysis and theories like this one, please consider subscribing and even checking out my Patreon. Our Discord channel is having a really fun, amazing holiday party this weekend, and I hope to see all of you there. There's going to be fanfic reading, an art show and contest, and a number of the staff have put together brand new holiday parody carols. There's also going to be trivia and more. The whole thing is going to be a lot of fun, and I do hope to see you there. I'd like to say thank you to my friends and family, my volunteer Discord staff, and all of my patrons who make this channel possible. If you'd like to join my Patreon, I've started posting all of my analysis and theories early there, and you can watch and rewatch them without the annoying YouTube ads. This is in addition to the monthly rewatch notes, X-ray, and Easter egg spotting. Until then, have a safe and warm and happy holiday season, and as always, thanks for watching!